Thank you so much, Julie. And thank you to all of you guys for attending because, as you may know, since I'm here in Israel, Hanukkah is already over for me. But because I'm doing this for you, I've gotten the opportunity to extend my Hanukkah for a few more hours. So it feels really special, and I appreciate that. We're going to do an interesting tour today that'll also be fun, light, and enjoyable. And basically what we're going to be doing is looking at many different aspects of the menorah. The menorah as a symbol. We're going to look at its meaning, at its symbolism, at its importance. And basically I'm breaking down this tour, if you will. It's not exactly a tour in the traditional sense, but we will be going to various places, primarily in Jerusalem itself. I'm breaking it into three sections. The first section is going to be about history. The second section is going to be about beauty. And the third section is going to be about fun. Now, I don't want to make it seem like it's going to be exclusive. You know, there will be some fun in the other parts and some beauty in the other parts. But more or less, it will be broken down into those sections. So I think that it's going to be a unique experience for you guys and hopefully a very fun and an interesting one as well. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm originally from the States, as you can hear from my accent. Maybe you can see my Hawaiian shirt. I live here in Jerusalem, and so it's a place I know really well. So I'm going to be taking you to lots of different places to learn about the menorah. And there's probably no better place to start any tour of Israel and Jerusalem than at the seat of our government, the Knesset. And so that's really where we're going to begin this tour right now. So basically, you see here the Knesset in front of you. And what I'm going to do, a lot of what I have in this presentation are photos that I'll be explaining lots of things. There are some videos that I've shot specifically for the presentation, such as this one. So I'll speak in between them. This is the Knesset, our House of Parliament. And flying in front of it, there are flags, Israeli flags, some that are hanging right there. And you can see, of course, the Star of David. Oops, I'm so sorry. That was an accidental. Oops, that's going wrong. Here we go. Sorry, one more time. This is the Knesset, our House of Parliament. And flying in front of it, there are flags, Israeli flags, some that are hanging right there. And you can see, of course, the Star of David, which is on our flag, one of the symbols of the state. But in fact, the emblem of the state of Israel, you can see right over here, has on it a menorah. Right between two olive branches, and beneath it, the word Israel. So for starters, I want to make two kind of distinctions. One between the Star of David and the menorah, and I'll start with that. So today, if you were to symbolize the various religions, there are symbols that are most well known. For example, Christianity, you would use a crucifix. For Islam, a crescent. And for Judaism, typically a Star of David. Not only Judaism, also Christianity, that's not an ancient symbol. For them, the ancient symbol was a fish. For us, the ancient symbol of Judaism was not a Star of David. That's a fairly modern symbol associated with our religion. Obviously, the symbol existed just as a geometric pattern. But its use as a symbol of Judaism is only a few hundred years old. In ancient times, the symbol of our people was the menorah. Just like you might wear a Star of David around your neck, somebody else might wear a menorah around their neck in ancient times. That would literally be what the symbol was. And what we're going to be doing a little bit is seeing a number of those representations historically and up until today. But the other distinction I want to make is that those of you who are looking at this menorah that's you see right in front of you, that is part of the seal of the state of Israel, you'll notice that it's different than what many of you have been lighting for the last 8 days, because there are 7 branches of equal height. Whereas what you or most of us who light have been lighting would have 9 branches. 8 of them for the 8 days of the holiday of Hanukkah, and 1, often the center one, or it's at least in some way set off either higher or lower or separate on the side, that's called the shamus, that's used for lighting the others. To be clear, the word menorah means candelabra, so both are menorahs. In other words, the Hanukkah menorah that you have lit is a menorah, but it's a specific kind of menorah that in Hebrew and here in Israel we will typically refer to it as a Chanukiah, meaning a menorah for Hanukkah. So I want to make that distinction clear. The 7-branched menorah that you're looking at is actually a representation of the menorah that sat and stood, I should say, in the Holy Temple of Jerusalem, in what we call in Hebrew the Beit HaMikdash. It was 7 branches, all of the same height, and that was for the 7 days of the week. So on Sunday they would light 1 candle, on Monday 2 candles, etc. Not candles, oil, I should say, as you know the purpose of this holiday. So that's just 2 important distinctions to keep in mind that we will return to at times. And so that's a little introduction. From there, I want to move to ancient Jerusalem, to the Old City. And there is a very interesting archaeological site there that perhaps many of you, even those of you who have been in Israel and been to Jerusalem, you may not have seen or visited because it's actually beneath a building. So it's entirely covered, and it's called the Herodian Quarter, or the Herodian Mansions. In this site, there are the archaeological remains of pieces, not all complete, 5 different gorgeous, beautiful villas, massive mansions from the time of King Herod, which is 2,000 years ago, when the temple still stood. And in it, you see this. Now, obviously, you can see that part of it is reconstructed, but these are the original pieces. This is carved into a wall, and very clearly, you can see that there is a depiction of a menorah. But what I want to be clear is that this is not just a depiction of a menorah. This, for everything that we can understand, is actually a depiction of the menorah that stood in the temple itself. Now, how do we know this? Well, these homes, here's a piece of one of them. You can see very elaborate. Obviously, the wood here is all reconstruction, but a lot of what you see is the original stuff. Beautiful mosaic on the floor, which is expensive, fancy stone furniture and things of that nature. For various reasons, it has been concluded that these homes belonged to the priests, the Kohanim, those priests that served in the temple. This site is literally just a few hundred yards from the Temple Mount itself. And so, if the people living in these houses were priests, just a few hundred yards from the temple, and they served there and saw it, we have every reason to think that they weren't just, doodling some random candelabrum. They were actually depicting the menorah of the temple itself. And so when we look back at this picture, I want you to think of it almost kind of like a periscope, 2 sets of mirrors, okay? The menorah was there, he saw it, he depicted it, and we're seeing this depiction right here, which is amazing to think that literally we're seeing secondhand what the menorah looked like from somebody who saw it with his own eyes, an object in the temple. We believe these 2 things on the side. It's hard to tell, it's only a piece of it, but we believe that one is a depiction of the altar and one is a depiction of the table of the showbreads. Remember that because I will come back to it later. In the temple, among other utensils, there was a table on which sat every week, they placed 12 fresh loaves of bread to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. This was a significant item in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple. Okay, so we've seen a very modern depiction in the state of Israel on its symbol, and now we've seen an extremely ancient, one of the oldest. This is maybe not the absolute oldest, but it is one of the oldest depictions ever found of a menorah, and as I said, probably of the menorah. So from there, we're going to step out of the Herodian quarter into the Jewish quarter itself. Sorry about that. Into the Jewish quarter itself. And there is, probably some of you have seen it if you've been in the Jewish quarter, this beautiful golden menorah.
So this beautiful golden menorah that you can see right here in the middle of the Jewish quarter is modeled on what we believe the menorah in the Beit HaMikdash in the temple actually looked like. The question is, how would we know this? Down to the details of that base. And in a minute, I will show you what this is based on. But I'll also mention that it's debated. We don't know for sure how accurate this is, but it's one of the best guesses we have. And regardless, it's beautiful. I want you to notice the top that has 7 branches, all of the same height. And that is, of course, what the menorah in the temple looked like for the 7 days of the week. This is not a menorah for Hanukkah.
Now, looking at that base, it may already look familiar to you because you already saw it in the emblem. Look at the base there. You can see that this is a very similar look. This picture that you see in the emblem and what you just saw in this 3-dimensional golden menorah that is outside in the Jewish quarter. Both of them were based on this. Now, I don't know how many of you have been to Rome. This is the Arch of Titus in Rome. And the Arch of Titus was built specifically to celebrate the Roman destruction of Jerusalem and the conquering, or I should say, they weren't conquering, they were already in charge, but the putting down of the Great Revolt that lasted from 66 until 73 CE, when the Jews rebelled against Rome. Once they finished and also destroyed Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, this was built in Rome to celebrate that victory. And you see them carrying back various ritual items. And what you see very clearly right over here is a menorah that looks very similar to ones you saw. Now, the ones that you saw were drawn or built based off of this. As I said, it's debated. There are many who believe that the artist who erected this arch or who carved this arch, it's very possible he never actually saw the menorah. Or even if he did, he may have just seen it for a couple of brief moments and then just sort of, did his own extrapolation. Because there are those who look at it and say that really artistically it looks very much in a Roman style of art. And so it's debated, but regardless, it is certainly the best guess that we have. And we see this now showing up in modern times as well. And I like it because it sort of is a representation of, hey, you know what, you guys went, you conquered Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, and we're still here. And where are you guys? And that's kind of something special to think about when you think about the Jewish nation, that we've been around for this long. We've outlived most of our enemies. So with that sort of intro of a couple of different historical places, one of the best ways to explore history via artifacts and art is in one of the best sites in Jerusalem, which is the Israel Museum. The Israel Museum is truly a world-class museum, so if any of you guys come here, I highly recommend going. And we're going to be moving through various wings of the museum to see various depictions of the menorah, but through it understand how important of a symbol it became for the Jewish people. So I want to start at the very entrance. As soon as you enter into the museum, this is one of the first things you see. Up on these cement pedestals, the tops, these things that you see all up here, are lintels, the top of doors that graced synagogues, various synagogues in the Byzantine era. Now, I want to make clear that based on where the most ancient versions of the menorah were found, the example I showed you in the Herodian quarter, there is another example a little bit outside of Jerusalem. Some have speculated that in the earliest times, the menorah was not a symbol of all Jews, but rather was a symbol specifically of the priestly class, the Kohanim. Possible, we don't know, it's speculation, but certainly by this time, the Byzantine period, which begins in the early 4th century and continues until the early 7th century, certainly by this point, it had become a symbol of Judaism. We know this, for example, because in the north of our country of Israel, there's an archaeological site called Beit Sha'arim, within which are numerous catacombs and burial caves. And in many of them, we see the menorah as a symbol throughout, not specifically for Kohanim, just for Jews who were there. And so that's a really clear way of seeing that it had become a symbol for the Jewish people. So all of these gracing the tops of synagogue doors, entrances, one of them, for example, has this design on it. And we believe what this was meant to be was sort of a stylized depiction of how they imagined the temple itself looked, the entrance to the temple. And the reason for this, and this is important because it explains why the menorah shows up so much in synagogue art, is because what is the purpose of a synagogue? Why do we have synagogues? You may say it's to pray. I can take that then a step further and say, well, why do we pray 3 times a day? Why do Jews pray 3 times a day? Because the synagogue is meant to be a miniature recreation, hypothetically, not literally, of the holy temple that stood in Jerusalem, the Beit HaMikdash. They sacrifice 3 times every day, so we pray 3 times every day. And so as a reminder that this synagogue that one would be entering somewhere in the north of Israel was actually a miniature version. In Hebrew, we call it a mikdash me'at, a little mikdash, a little temple. They would put over the door this depiction of what they, anyone would look at and be like, oh yeah, we're going into this because we can't go into that. On another one of these, though, the one that was all the way in the back that was extra beautiful, it was in white, beautiful limestone rather than this black basalt stone, is right in the middle, a depiction of the menorah. Again, a 7-branch menorah, so very clear that this is the one of the temple. It's just from a few hundred years after the temple was destroyed. And so already we're seeing this menorah being a reminder of the place that the Holy Temple of Jerusalem held for our people and connected us back to that. So with that entrance, we're going to move into the museum itself, and I'm going to start by showing you this menorah cropping up in various synagogues, just so you get an idea of that continuity, because we're going to see it through a long period of time. So this one that you see here, carved out of a big piece of stone, comes from Tiberias in the north of the country on the Sea of Galilee. I'll point out, just to make it clear, and I'm going to come back to this later, that you see that these lines here, they don't actually go all the way through. So it's not a fully 3-dimensionally depicted menorah. Rather, it's really just a semicircular piece of stone with the holes on top, and then they carved the side to make it look like the menorah. We're going to see this repeated a few times. That's an important thing, and I'll explain why in a moment. So this one, as I said, is from the north of the country, from Tiberias, dates to around the 4th or 5th century. This, from around the same time period, perhaps a bit later, you can see this gorgeous menorah here. If I remember correctly, it may even be made out of ivory, but I'm not sure. It might be marble. I don't remember. This comes from south of Jerusalem, so a different direction, in the Hebron Hills, a place called Susia. And again, although it's not complete because pieces are broken, you see this sort of mesh or network that was filling in between all of the branches, so that again, it wasn't fully 3-dimensional. One more example of that is this one. This comes from the 6th or 7th century, also south of Jerusalem, a town called Ma'on. And you'll notice that not just the top, which is obviously some of these things is just a physical function to make sure it doesn't fall apart, but you can see that it actually, the one beneath it, which indicates that it wasn't just here, that all of these probably had connectors going all the way down it. Now, the reason that we believe that you see this over and over again is because the Talmud tells us that you should not recreate a symbol that represents the menorah of the temple, because the temple has been destroyed. It's not necessarily like a straight up commandment, but it's just like sort of a custom not to fully recreate this 3-dimensional menorah, because to remind us we don't have it anymore, and that what you have here isn't the real thing. We don't know for sure if that's why, but it is certainly something that crops up a lot. I'm going to come back to that again in a few moments as well. So we've seen now from like the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th centuries. I want to jump far ahead. And in a different section of the museum, in the Judaica wing, we find this. These doors that you see here are the doors of a Torah ark, where we keep the Torah in a synagogue. This dates to the 17th century, so a millennium later, and from a totally different part of the world, from Krakow in Poland. And beautiful doors, obviously they're old. This is a representation of the table of the showbreads. You see that there's sort of missing because it's like a little damaged, but there were 12 of them there. And on the right side door, you see once again a depiction of the menorah. This comes from a synagogue known as the Ramah synagogue, named after a famous rabbi in Poland in the 17th century. To go to a completely different part of the world. So one of the really awesome things in the Israel Museum, in the Judaic wing in particular, is that obviously Jews have spread everywhere in the world, literally everywhere. And we don't always last in every location. There are certainly communities that have died out over time. People moved away, or unfortunately there was persecution, etc. So what they did is they found certain communities in different parts of the world where those communities had died out, and the synagogues were essentially sitting vacant. And they took them apart, brought them to the museum, and reconstructed them inside of the museum itself. And you can go into 4 different synagogues from totally different parts of the world, also all from around the same time. They all date to approximately the year 1700. And what's fascinating is to see how the architecture reflects the local vernacular in each place, because really in any synagogue, there are very few things that you must have design-wise. And so you can build it looking however you want, whatever shape and design you want it to be. But yet, you also see certain things repeated, such as Hebrew writing, and often the menorah. So I want you to look at this one here. You may be able to tell perhaps, or take a guess from the style of architecture that you see here. This actually comes from a synagogue in India. Don't know how much you know about the Indian Jewish community. There's actually 3 or 4 distinct, depending on how you're defining them, distinct Jewish communities of India that developed hundreds of miles apart, and for most of their history didn't even know about the other one. And so they completely independently developed. This synagogue comes from Cochin in the south of the country on the west coast, the Malabar coast, one of the ancient Jewish communities of India. And you can see that the carved wood is very, very much the style of Indian architecture and art. And this again is the Torah ark. And you can see right up on top the menorah once again. And you also notice up here, this is the high priest's breastplate. So here we are in the middle of, or not in the middle, at the very edge of India, at the edge of the known world, really, at the time. Well, no, by 1700, it was already, the whole world was known, but still, really far off. And a Jewish community there has this beautiful hand-carved wooden ark in the style that they know, and yet it has these same symbols, including, of course, the menorah, which is a really beautiful thing. Now, this is a very interesting design over here. What you see is these sort of rays or pipes going down from a bowl up on top. And what I will tell you is that even though they don't look like it, these on the 2 sides are representations of olive trees, which is appropriate for our holiday, olive oil. How do I know this stuff? Well, what we're looking at is a depiction of a prophecy in the book of Zechariah, chapter 4. And in it, there is a prophecy of the redemption, of the return of the Jews to the land of Israel. Zechariah, in this sort of dreamlike vision, sees a menorah standing. There are 2 olive trees on the sides, and the olive trees themselves, without any effort being made, fill a bowl with oil. And the oil from there flows down in pipes to fill the menorah itself. And sort of being this idea of that you don't even need to work for it, this redemption will just come. And it's a really beautiful symbol. So then you may ask, well, then why don't they look like olive trees if they're olive trees? It's a good question, right? The answer for that is simply that, I have to remind you, they're in India. They'd never seen an olive tree. So they just depicted a tree with some kind of a fruit. Maybe they had seen olives separately, and that's how they know the size. But they never saw an olive tree, so they just guessed what the olive tree is about. And yet, this menorah for them was such an important symbol, because even in the far reaches of India, the Jews dreamed of coming to Israel and returning to Israel. And so the menorah is not just a symbol of the Jewish people, it's also a symbol of our redemption. So, we've seen it now in synagogue architecture. I want to show you now also how the menorah crops up on various other ritual objects. And so, for example, this is a Torah breastplate, meaning the sort of a flat piece that is hung on a chain on the front of a Torah. And you can see, once again, the menorah in the symbol over here in the center. And a really magnificent piece is this one. This actually comes was found in an archaeological dig right here in Jerusalem, literally steps from the Temple Mount in the southern wall excavations. And one of the amazing things about gold, by the way, which this is that it doesn't tarnish. So if you drop a piece of gold, it gets buried underground, and you find it 2,000 years later, looks exactly the same. This is what it looked like when they found it. And you see in the middle here a depiction of a menorah. Okay, again, the menorah. You see also a shofar that we blow on Rosh Hashanah. And we believe that this is meant to be a Torah scroll. And you can see that it's on a chain. And for various reasons, particularly because this is very similar in design to a different one found somewhere else, but that we know for sure it was this. We believe that this too was for hanging around a Torah. Now, I'll tell you, this is significantly smaller than the one I just showed you. It's about maybe that big, okay? So, still, it's gold, it's beautiful. Not as big as the others, but still, magnificent thing and a ritual object. In another part of the museum, there is a gorgeous room just full of ancient glass. When I go there as a tour guide, I don't even have anything to say. I just go there because it's so beautiful. And these two objects, very interesting, found in Rome, different part of the world, in the catacombs, in the burial caves of Rome, where there were obviously Christian catacombs and Jewish catacombs. Those who couldn't be buried in other cemeteries were buried in the catacombs. And so since this is found in there, we believe that these two items here were part of funerary processions and other rituals connected with that. They were probably just the bottoms of full bowls. This is all that remains. Both of them are basically two layers of glass, and in between them, sandwiched in between them, is gold leaf. And you can see in this one, two menorahs. Here you see one. I'll just go in a little bit closer there. And you see this symbol. Again, the Torah, the temple menorah, the seven-branched one, being used in a purpose of ritual to identify. This is a Jewish ritual, therefore we are using a Jewish symbol being the menorah. And from that, I want to take you not just, so we've seen it in synagogue architecture, we've seen it in ritual objects, also we see it crop up regularly in simple, everyday, mundane objects. This, for example, is a frame for a mirror. This would be a mirror right here, okay, right in the middle of that square. And when you're brushing your teeth or combing your hair, on both sides you have a menorah. Why? Because we're Jews, and so we put it everywhere. That's it. No other reason than that. And actually, one of the objects I love, I think this is so cool, also because I'm a food guy. These that you may see here are actually stamps that you would put when you bake bread. So you'd make a loaf of bread and you stamp the outside with this, and then when it bakes, it's got that impression in it. And notice, menorah, 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 all of these, not all of them, some of them have other designs, but these are all menorah impressions because that's what a Jew wants there. So you get to eat your menorah too, which is really cool. And you remember before I said that just like you might wear a Star of David around your neck, someone else might wear a menorah around their neck. Well, back in that glass room, look at that. Here's a glass pendant, and the center here, the design on it, blown up so you can see it better, is a menorah. Again, a shofar, another temple object. And in this case, not a Torah scroll, but a lulav and etrog, the palm branch and the citron that we weave together on the holiday of Sukkot. So from all of this, we've seen this continuity and development of the symbol from perhaps just representing the priestly tribe who worked in the temple, then to all of the Jewish people, then seeing it in synagogue architecture, seeing it in ritual objects from all over the world, all different time periods, and up to even everyday mundane objects that were just owned by Jews. So with that, the other thing I want to show you in the museum, and if you go, you must go there because it's absolutely beautiful. The museum has one of the most magnificent collections of Chanukiot. So now we're actually going to the specific Hanukkah menorahs, the 8-branched candelabra. Now, the first thing I want to point out is the shape. You notice already that this does not look like what you're used to of the standalone branches, and that goes back to what I mentioned before, that the Talmud says not to recreate the actual design of the menorah. So through most of history, this is what Chanukiot looked like. There would be 8 places for your lamps. There was probably, it's hard to see in this one, but I'm sure somewhere else is the ninth one, the shamas. Here you see it on the side over here. But it would be with a backing like that. Some people would hang it on their wall. Sometimes you might just let it sit resting on a table. But that was the standard design. Now, these two are 20th century designs. These come from the very famous Bezalel Art School of Jerusalem, the Bezalel Academy. But what I like about them is that you have both. This is a Hanukkah. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 candles. Same with right over here. And yet, in the background, you see a depiction of the 7-branched candelabrum of the temple. Because that's the idea. They say, if you're lighting this Hanukkah menorah for the holiday of Hanukkah, we want you to remember why. It's not just about a holiday that we've been celebrating for over 2,000 years, which we have. It's because what is the holiday of Hanukkah really about? It's about a rededication of the temple itself. And so here we have both a depiction of the menorah of the temple within a Chanukiah for the holiday. So that's the Bezalel Art School. To show you a few of the others that are interesting. So this one right here, this comes from Germany around 1800, give or take, maybe late 1700s, during the time of the Enlightenment. And it's there in Germany during the Enlightenment that there begins to crop up for the first time in probably about 2,000 years, people sort of going against that custom and actually recreating full freestanding three-dimensional menorahs, as you see right here. As I said, it wasn't necessarily a commandment. It was more of a just kind of a custom. And for better or for worse, that has sort of caught on now. So nowadays, many people have menorahs of this nature where it's the freestanding, although there are still plenty that have the other kind as well. This one, beautiful, maybe not the most beautiful, but there's something I found very interesting about this, and this will connect us back to the very beginning. This Hanukkah comes from Italy, 16th century. And you can see that there's a design engraved on the back, and if we look closely at it, you'll see in the middle of it a Star of David. Now, I don't know that this is the absolute earliest depiction, but it's certainly one of the earliest depictions where it is clear that this is a Star of David associated with Judaism. Otherwise, why are they putting one right in the middle of this menorah? Clearly, this is marking it. It was clearly already in use and already recognized as a symbol of Judaism. As I mentioned in the beginning, the Star of David that we see on the flag of Israel is a modern symbol. And so here, from the 16th century, so that's 500 years ago, approximately, we do see it in use. But it was not in anything as a ritual symbol earlier than that. And the last thing that I want to show you in the Israel Museum is not a Hanukkah or a menorah, but I think it's relevant to the holiday, and I think it's something really cool, so I wanted to show it to you. When we tell the story of the holiday of Hanukkah, if you tell it to your children especially, we talk about the Maccabees, and we talk about the bad guy, the head of the Greeks, who was named Antiochus, or Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Epiphanes means God incarnate. Arrogant guy, right? But I want you to know, like, we tell this story about this struggle, and it's a mythic story, and there's so much there, and we forget that these were real people. Now, we don't have any depictions of Judah Maccabee, or of any of the other Maccabees for that matter, but Antiochus IV, we know, was an actual person, and this is him. This is a coin that was found in Israel, in Akko, and we have many of them, obviously. So this is, we know, even if this one you can't see any inscription on, we know because of the others, this is Antiochus IV Epiphanes. So when you tell that Hanukkah story, or when you think about it over the next few hours before the holiday ends, now you have a face to put to the bad guy. That's what he looked like. Pretty handsome guy, I guess, but looks can be deceiving, I guess, right? So that is the end of, almost the end. Actually, one more bit I want to do, and then we'll end the first thing, and I'll see if there's any important questions. I just want to show you the continuity outside of the Israel Museum of how prevalent a symbol the menorah has become by showing you a few different spots in Jerusalem where we see it all over the place. So first of all, this is the Bezalel Academy, the Bezalel Art School building I was talking about. It's a beautiful building, and right up on top you see the menorah right there. This is what we call the National Institutions buildings. So this is things where you have like JNF and Karen ISO and various things like that. And right up on top, again, a menorah. By the way, this is a very interesting one. I have not yet found an answer for it, but you'll notice it's a 7-branched menorah, like in the temple, and yet the middle branch is higher, like a Hanukkah, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's that. I do see that there's a raised hand. I'll get to it in just a minute. I'm just going to finish this section, and then I'll do some questions. This is gorgeous and very large, as you can see by the child in front of it. This is at the Western Wall. This is the Western Wall behind it. This beautiful menorah stands there every year. And the shape specifically, not the design of it, but the shape mimics this one that some of you may know from the outside of the Knesset. This was a gift from Britain to Israel in 1956, designed by a Jewish artist named Benno Elkin. And I have a little video. I want to show you a little bit of it. Actually, we're running short on time. I'm not going to focus on too much of it. I'll just show you that all of these different symbols that you see, each of the little panels is a different symbol from either people that are famous or other aspects of Jewish history. But I do want to focus on 2 small things. So the picture that I'm circling with my cursor on the right is this one right here. And this represents the Maccabean revolt. Now, how do we know that? Well, the word Maccabee is just a nickname. The family is actually called the Hasmonean family. The word Maccabee is a nickname for them. We don't really know for sure what it means, but one of the theories is that it comes from the Aramaic word for a hammer, which you can see right here, this being Judah the Maccabee holding up a war hammer, and so this is his depiction of that. Now, there are a lot of things on this menorah that are really beautiful, but some things that are perhaps more violent, some things that are perhaps more peaceful. And the artist, I think, did a very interesting thing by, right along the bottom here, there is a sentence, a pasuk, a quote from the Bible, once again from the book of Zechariah chapter 4. And what it says is, lo b'chayil v'lo b'koach, not with fighting or valor, not with strength, ki'im biruchi, amar Hashem tzvaot, but rather in my spirit, says the God of hosts. And so once again, the idea of calling for this redemption, the same prophecy that was in the synagogue in India, and yet also saying, we know that at times we do need to fight, but in reality, trusting in God and praying to God and things of that is what will bring about our redemption. So with that, I'm actually going to stop the share momentarily so we can deal with some questions, and then we'll go on to part 2 and 3.
Great, thanks, Joel. So there were a couple of questions of clarification that came in the chat. The first is, which Galilean synagogue was the limestone lintel with the menorah?
It doesn't specify, I don't recall that it specifies. It may not have been found in situ, meaning it may not have been found on site, but we can tell that it was from a Galilean synagogue. If it does say, I don't recall. I can check, and if anybody, I'll put at the end my email and chat. If anybody wants, they can email me and I'll see if I can find out. But it's definitely from the Galilee.
Okay, and I think this question was in reference to the Torah Ark from India. Was there a word on the Ark, a Hebrew word or phrase?
There definitely is Hebrew writing. I don't think we saw it in the close-up picture. In the big wide picture, there definitely was along the side Hebrew writing. I don't recall what it says, but there's absolutely Hebrew writing on it for sure, yes.
Okay, next question. Was the menorah also a widely recognized symbol during the First Temple period?
That's a good question. We would think it should be. We don't have any specific evidence of that, mainly because we don't have much physical evidence from then. What I can say is there's clearly a reason that Zechariah, for example, who's living around that time, uses it as a symbol in this prophecy. Certainly, it was an important symbol. We can tell that from the literature. Now, when exactly the book of Zechariah was written is, I don't know exactly, but certainly he lived around that time, which would suggest at least a valuing of that symbol.
And do you know when the first Hanukkah was created?
I don't. Certainly, we have I'm trying to remember in the Talmud. Look, the Talmud interestingly does not deal a lot with Hanukkah. There's no tractate, no book dedicated to Hanukkah, where there is for every other holiday, including Purim. It is mentioned in there, and I don't recall whether the lighting of the menorah itself, meaning the lighting of the Hanukkah itself, is mentioned in there. It may be. And if so, then without even seeing one, we know that it was a practice. I would suspect that that was the case, because there's no reason to think that they started lighting a Hanukkah that much later. It probably was meant to be this idea from early on, but I don't know off the top of my head. It's a good question.
And one more question that came into the chat, and then I see Michelle has a raised hand. Could you talk more about the raised middle branch versus not raised?
Sure. So obviously, if you have statuarily, that's not a word, but I just made it up, a central branch with ones coming out of it, you end up with an odd number of branches. You have the one in the middle and then two coming out of each side. So for the one in the temple where there were 7 branches for the 7 days of the week, that's an odd number. And so it works out perfectly. And so that's why they're all the same height, because they were all equal. On Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, on Wednesday, you would be lighting the middle branch, and on Thursday the next, etc. For the Chanukiah, which is representing 8 days, that's an even number. And so you'd have your 8 branches, but the middle one is not one of those 8. And so that's why it's raised, to show this is different. This is not a candle. So that if you look at it on day 3, or let's say day 4, when you have 4 of them lit and that one, you need to know this one up, it's day 4. It's only these 4. It's not the one raised. It's separate. It's different. Don't count it when you look to see what day we're on. That's the idea of it. It's not always raised. It might be all in sequence with one of them a little bit off to the side. We saw that on one of the Bezalel ones. It might be lower. It might be in front. But the tradition is to have that separate candle, which we call a shamash, that we use that one separate. And if you're using candles rather than oil, you can actually take it, light the other candles with it, and then put it back. I see a question that's coming. Does the menorah represent the tree of life? I've never heard that. I can't say it doesn't, but I've never heard that specifically. Yeah. So you said somebody had a hand up, Julie.
Yeah, Michelle, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Shalom.
Hi.
I was wondering, referring back to the temple menorah, the priestly menorah, does it have any connection to the Ner Tamid, the eternal light? Like, to me, it just seems to be like connected to like the light of God and like illumination and maybe not necessarily Torah, but I don't know. It just seems to connect somehow, but I'm not sure if I'm the right idea.
Certainly, yeah. So certainly within temples today, we typically have what's called a Ner Tamid, an eternal light in front of the ark. And if I'm not mistaken, it's something that I'd have to brush up on. I believe there was a separate fire constantly burning within the temple compound, but it may have been used to kindle the light of the menorah. That I don't recall. I don't want to say with certainty, but the idea that this menorah was every day was lit, at least in theory, even if there wasn't a separate one, this shows that there was this constant light burning in the temple. So whether it's the literal or not, there certainly is some connection to it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else, Julie, or should we go back?
Well, there were a couple more, but I'm just thinking about timing wise.
Yeah, I don't mind staying longer at the end. Let's make sure we get the main stuff done, and then we'll come in, we'll do more questions afterwards, and anybody who has to leave early can leave, and I'm happy to stick around and answer more questions.
Thank you.
Does that sound good?
Great,
right.
Thank you.
Cool. So now we're going to move on. I mean, the last few were really talking about the beauty aspect, even though it was within the history, and so now we want to focus on some beauty. So I want to take you now to a few different places within Jerusalem that have really special collections of Chanukiot that if you come, you can visit them. So first, let's check this out.
I'm standing here outside of an old home. There's lots of new construction behind it, as you see. But the building that you see right here is known as Ticho House. It was the home of Anna Ticho and her husband, Dr. Avraham Albert Ticho. This house was built in the 1860s, one of the first private homes built outside of the walls of the old city. It was built by wealthy Arabs. There were a number who built sort of vacation getaway houses outside the walls. And in the 1920s and 1924, it was purchased by the Tichos. It was both their residence as well as a clinic for Dr. Ticho, who was an ophthalmologist. And we're going to go inside and see something special connected with Hanukkah.
So continuing inside.
This is the Ticho House Museum. It's a museum of contemporary art, as well as a museum that has on display a number of the personal works of Anna and Dr. Albert Avraham Ticho. And inside of this room, right over here, is a collection of a number of their personal artifacts and personal works of art. But especially, you'll notice, a large collection of Chanukiot, of Hanukkah menorahs. These were collected by Dr. Ticho over the span of about 40 years. He had a collection of about 150 of them in total. And there's 21 on display here, as well as a number more that are on display in the Israel Museum, the parent institution of Ticho House. And in addition to the simple beauty of the pieces here, as well as the diversity of styles from all around the Jewish diaspora, there are a number of these that have some particularly interesting features that are common in Chanukiot from around the world. And so I'm going to show you now a few of these particularly interesting ones to learn a little bit more.
So yeah, what's interesting is that we'll see sort of themes cropping up in the ritual object art in different parts of the world. So for example, this one that you see right here, I forget exactly where it comes from. I believe it's, I don't remember exactly where it comes from, but one of the things you'll notice is it looks like a building. You see there's a doorway here and there's a wall. Architectural elements, you can see over here pillars, and that's again something that crops up a lot because it reminds us that at its core, the holiday of Hanukkah is about the rededication of a building. Okay, it's a very, very special building. It's the temple, but still, it is a physical structure. And so many Chanukiot from around the world will have architectural elements in them. Picking that up, I want to show you a different one, which I find very quaint. This comes from Eastern Europe, 18th century. And again, you see the architectural elements, but it's in the vernacular of Eastern Europe. So like this type of a roof, it's kind of a thatched roof that you might see on like in like a shtetl somewhere. That's what they knew. And so that's what they put in here as an architectural element. So that's kind of cute and interesting. But one of the things that's also interesting, you may notice that in addition to the places for the Hanukkah candles down below over here, you also have these two candle holders on the top. Why two? And so many times, especially maybe if you were a little poor and you had the money that you were able to actually buy a beautiful ritual object, you want to use it all the time. And so that would often be the case with a Chanukiah, that rather than just using it 1 week of the year, you could also put your Shabbat candles into it. And so this could be for Shabbat candles during every week, as well as having your Chanukiah during the rest of the year, during Hanukkah. Now this one, which is very interesting, comes from Baghdad, from Iraq, in the 19th century. And the Jews of Iraq at the time were not necessarily in the greatest situation politically. It was very difficult for them. And they were also a people that were very much focused on mysticism and some might say superstition, but regardless, definitely these ideas. And so what you see on this one is all over these hands, which are what we know as a khamsa. Khamsa is a hand that is a sort of a generic good luck charm within the entire Arab world, both among Muslims and among Jews who live there. And so that's one of the things that comes up as sort of a ward against evil. And on the three bottom ones here, and also the top one here, what's written on it, it's hard to see, but even if you read Hebrew, it's hard to see. It says, Ben Porat Yosef, which are words that come from Jacob's blessing to Joseph. These words have also become sort of a generic symbol of warding off the evil eye, because according to the tradition, the evil eye could not touch Joseph. And so those words are also sort of an amulet that's often used. But from a place like this, I want to show you a different part of the world where the Jews were just starting to have it really good, and something interesting shows up in their menorah too. So moving to Vienna in the late 19th or mid 19th century, 1862. This is before emancipation in Vienna, but it's the beginning. It's the Jews are already in pretty good shape there. On this menorah, what you see here is this two-headed eagle, which was the symbol at the time of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Completely a not Jewish empire, secular, and yet in this Jewish ritual object held up by two lions, which may symbolize Judaism, is the symbol of the ruling power. Because when Jews had things good, we often want to praise the power that we had it good under. It would not be uncommon. I'm sure there are plenty of modern contemporary Chanukiot in America that have a flag, an American flag on it, because, or the bald eagle or things of that nature. Same exact thing. And so we see two different menorahs, both reflecting the political reality of the people that were living there at the time. Now this one is pretty interesting. It's a little hard to see, but this is a woman, you might be able to tell from the shape, and you see a sword in her hand, and even harder to see right down here is a severed head. Sorry, it's true. This is a depiction of Judith. Judith is a heroine from the book of Judith that often becomes associated with Hanukkah. And so she finds her way onto this Hanukkah. The interesting thing, though, however, is that the story of Judith actually has nothing to do with Hanukkah. It actually takes place in Assyria, hundreds of years before the Hanukkah story, and yet somehow, for various reasons, it's become associated. So it ends up in here. I see we're running short on time, so I want to move a little bit more quickly and show you a different collection that is totally different and equally magnificent in a different way.
So this here is called the Bukharin Quarter. It's a historic area of Jerusalem. And you see over here a little store of hardware and whatnot. But there's something very special. I'm going to take you inside to meet the owner, whose name is Yosef Shabtai. And he has something very special to show in addition to the stuff he sells. And there's just a little taste.
So inside of this store is a massive collection, a personal collection that this man collected of Chanukiot from all over the world. And it's in a rundown store. You see the paint's peeling over here. It's not in very good shape. Here's a few of them. They're hanging up everywhere. Here's some more. They're haphazard. They're dusty. They're in multiple rooms. And on that, just to see a little bit more,
I'm inside of the innermost chamber of this amazing collection of about 5,000 Chanukiot from all around the world. I'm just going to show you a few quickly by moving through some of the rooms. This is Yosef. And Yosef says that there are Chanukiot from over 75 countries from around the world. This is an Indian Chanukiah that's made of wood because they didn't have a lot of money.
Joel?
Yeah.
The video seems to have frozen. Oh, there it goes.
I'll give it a second to maybe catch up. Did you hear and not see, or did you not get either?
Correct, we heard.
Okay, so hopefully the video will come back now.
A Greek one. This is Turkish.
How's that?
Wow.
Great.
Grateful? Ah. Kind of. German. Wow, that's really special. Paras?
Yeah.
from Persia.
זה מבוכרה.
Wow.
בוכרי.
Yeah, this is Bukharan from Uzbekistan. This middle piece right over here is actually something that was taken from the Holocaust. And Yosef here built the rest of the Chanukiah around it. It's a pretty incredible piece there.
כל חנוכיה זה סיפור, אז פחות או יותר הקדמתי לך.
He says, each Chanukiah is a story. And so this is a really special thing that I hope I'll be able to show you guys in person when you come to Jerusalem. You don't have to come here only on Hanukkah. You can come anytime and see this amazing collection.
So that's a really special thing. It's totally different. In the Ticho house, they're magnificent showpieces and polished and glass. And here you see there's thousands of them all over, all different, really incredible. Just to quickly show you just a couple of other ones. This is another Betzalel piece. And this one is just, I saw that, I was just, this is magnificent. So that's kind of the end of the second section. I want to very briefly do this third section, and then we'll finish with some questions. So one of the popular things that tourists in Israel do on the holiday of Hanukkah, including many Israeli tourists, is to do what's called a Siur Chanukiah. They'll come to Jerusalem and they'll walk around in the neighborhoods to see all of the beautiful menorahs, because as you're going to see in a moment, we often put them outside rather than in our windows because of the idea of publicizing. So I want to start first in the Jewish quarter of the Old City.
So here in this street here in the Jewish quarter, you'll notice that in the middle of the wall, there's a picture of a Chanukiah. It's a metal Chanukiah. And you'll notice it is a Chanukiah and that there are 8 branches plus the middle one. And you can see that it's actually a gate that opens up. And that's because inside there's a Chanukiah, an actual one that will be used. Because we are supposed to be publicizing the mitzvah, you don't just light a Hanukkah menorah inside your house. At the very least, it should be at your window, but really it's supposed to be outside. And so all over Jerusalem, we will see things like this, where there's a niche outside of someone's house, and they can put their Chanukiah on there. If they need to, they can lock it. And it's a real proper way of publicizing the miracle of Hanukkah.
And so with that, we're going to go to my neighborhood, very close to my house. It's called Nachlaot, and it's a very quaint old neighborhood with lots of little alleyways. And just quickly show you a few pictures so you get a feel of what it's like walking around here on Hanukkah. So here's an example. A lot of us will put them in these glass cases so that the wind doesn't blow them out and you have like spaces for air to get inside so it can keep burning. And this is just outside this guy's house. He put it on a planter. Here you see 2, one above another. They're kind of hung on the wall, very pretty. You could see up on the balcony and then down below. That's also kind of nice with the Israeli flag here. This is also a bit of a hippie neighborhood, so there's a lot of like music and soul and all kinds of stuff like that. So people are just out and about, walking around, seeing this, playing music. I love this one. First of all, it's just a beautiful case, but look how they hung it on the wall. They took a child's chair and somehow hung the chair on the wall and then put this on this. This is suspended in midair. So that's kind of awesome. This one I love. It's a mass-produced menorah, but it's really beautiful because it's about Jerusalem. It says the word Yerushalayim up here, Jerusalem. Here you can see the wall of the old city. Here you see Montefiore's windmill. I really love this one. And just so you get a real taste, this video, just very short, shows you what it's like walking around. So just some fun stuff. Just a few more. This is absolutely gorgeous. Look at this with these globes of glass that are all suspended with their candles inside and the little girl lighting her menorah. I love this one. And actually, this is my menorah. So this was from last night when it was full. And you see this one is actually the old style. This is from a Jerusalem ceramic artist. And I moved recently. I don't have a balcony anymore, so I can't put it outside, but I did put it outside my door in the apartment building in the hall. And there it is right there. Very last thing, and then we go to questions because I want to keep this fun. No jaunt through Jerusalem no visit to Jerusalem on the holiday of Hanukkah is complete without going to the shuk and checking out our donuts, our sufganiyot, that are the highlight of everyone's holiday. So I made a very short, fun video for you guys to watch. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I hope you're hungry. I will stop the share again, but just to summarize everything, the Hanukkah menorah, symbolic of the menorah from the temple, is the ancient symbol of our people. It is a symbol that has found its way into ritual objects, into architecture, into mundane everyday objects, into art. And it's been a part of our culture for so long that there are Chanukiot from all over the world. And when you come to Jerusalem with the ingathering of the exiles of people from all over the world, those Chanukiot find their way here to make their way into magnificent collections and are burning right outside our houses as well.